I know a little bit about making kimchi, and a little bit about making kombucha, and a little bit about making yogurt, and a little bit about making idli, and I've been able to, like, connect a lot of dots. But it's also been very powerful to be able to share that with people. And, I think that, we all have to, sort of, recognize that the experiences that we have, the skills that we develop, are things that we can share with people, and we don't have to have all of the answers. We don't have to be, the ultimate experts in the world to be able to share this with people. So, you take whatever you've learned about, and then you show other people how you do it. And, there's no one way to do any of this stuff. I mean, I once watched someone deliver a sourdough making workshop, and her message was, you have to do it exactly like this or it won't work. And I mean, from where I'm standing, that's absurd. I mean, just because I've seen so many different styles of how people approach their sourdough. I've seen people who maintain their sourdough as a liquid, and I've seen people who maintain their sourdough as a solid, and every texture in between. And, I've seen people who ferment bread in 4 or 5 hours, and I've seen people who do a process that's 4 or 5 days. And, clearly there's no single way to make bread from a sourdough. There's no, single way to make sauerkraut. There's no single way to make kimchi. I mean, these are, there's no single way to make kombucha. These are, these traditions that have been elaborated and varied, and there's, all kinds of regional variations, and ultimately it comes down to family secrets. What's like, some grandma's like, sort of special ingredient or special element of the process. And so, you share the expertise that you have, but, it's never the only way to do it. And then as you're sharing it with people, you'll have people say like, oh, well, I learned how to do it this way. And you learn a different way of doing it. And, there's just so many ways to do all these things. Yes. Okay, the question is about freezing sauerkraut or heating it. Okay, so the question is about freezing it or heating it and how that affects the nutritional value. Well, I mean, if you're interested in the probiotic benefit of the sauerkraut, the bacteria themselves, heating it above the gentlest warming, I mean, basically heating it above about 120 Fahrenheit, what is that, like 45, 47 degrees Celsius, will just kill all the bacteria. Freezing, basically, the way freezing degrades bacteria is by water expanding and bursting cell walls. So, the studies that I've seen of that with sauerkraut suggest that every freeze and thaw cycle will kill off some cells, but not all of them. In general, with fermented foods, the waterier they are, the more freezing will kill the bacteria. The drier they are, the less they'll be impacted by freezing. So, for instance, when I meet bakers who like to back up their sourdough in the freezer, they'll typically bring it into a solid state rather than a liquid state to minimize the bursting of cells and maintain as much cell viability as possible. Now, let me just say one thing about heating sauerkraut. So sometimes I like to make kimchi soup. I like to make sauerkraut soup. I like to make pierogies with sauerkraut. I like to make pancakes with kimchi. I stand firmly against like the North American idea of you make your sauerkraut, you put it in canning jars, you pressure cook it so you can can it, and kill all the bacteria in all of it. But I think as long as you eat a little bit of it raw, there's nothing wrong with cooking some of it. And, all of the cultures where, fermented vegetables are central to the cuisine, people cook it in all kinds of beautiful ways. I mean, in Poland, they do this thing called bigos, where they marinate some meat in sauerkraut and then stew it in the sauerkraut for hours, and it's incredibly delicious. And so sometimes people are scandalized to see me cooking sauerkraut or kimchi, and I just feel like, why not cook some of it? As long as you eat some of it raw and get that live culture benefit, there's nothing wrong with also cooking some of it. It can be incredibly delicious. Yes. Yeah. So the question is about fish sauce, and wondering whether commercially available fish sauce is mostly pasteurized. And I have to honestly tell you, I'm not sure. I mean, certainly it is salty enough that there would be no necessity to pasteurize it. But that doesn't mean that people don't do it, and so I'm just honestly not sure whether most commercially available fish sauces are pasteurized or not. That just makes me think of koji, and let me just talk about koji for a minute. How many of you are familiar with koji? Know what koji is? Okay, koji is rice, barley, or other grains grown with a fungus, Aspergillus oryzae. Koji is a Japanese word, and koji is rarely used as a food itself, but it's the starter for making sake, for making miso, for making soy sauce. And in all of these foods and many, many more, it's the enzymes of the koji. Koji is just an incredible powerhouse of enzymes. It has amylase enzymes that break down carbohydrates, protease enzymes that break down proteins, lipase enzymes that break down lipids. And, right now, chefs all around the world are playing with koji in previously unimagined ways, and curing meat with koji, making fish sauce with koji. In Japan, there's a wild explosion of what's called shio koji, salt koji. It's basically salt, koji, and water, and you can marinate like anything in shio koji, and it will be transformed by its bath in these enzymes. So, vegetables, meat, eggs, tofu, anything marinated in koji will be pre-digested in certain ways by the koji, and and really sort of new flavors will emerge from it. I'm beginning to see back here maybe the results of the competition. Yeah, okay. Now,
can we say a big round of applause and thank you to Sandor Katz. Thank you for coming up. So great.